it's Lee here from Andertons TV, and I'm joined today by the very lovely Dave Clark. He is the R&D manager for Vox amplifiers, and today we're going to talk about tubes.
Yes.
Tubes. It feels like the start to some sort of Prince song. Electric word tubes. That means forever. That's a mighty long time. And I'm going to tell you that one day we suspect tubes will just disappear.
They could go away. Who knows?
Who knows?
Now, vacuum cleaners is a good example of this. Vacuum tubes, vacuum cleaners, completely different, but are they similar? Because the European Union brought in legislation saying, hey, vacuum cleaners, they need to be more efficient to be plugged into the mains. So, could that happen to tubes?
Well,
who knows?
I think there are certainly, I think most people are aware or have read somewhere that, you know, everybody accepts that from their heyday in the sort of the 40s and the 50s, where all manner of electrical equipment used valves to work, to nowadays where really the guitar amp, little bit of hi-fi, little bit of military equipment still use valves somehow, but most equipment, you know, has moved on and uses much cheaper to manufacture and faster to manufacture components. Meaning that there are, how many factories do you think there are left in the world making valves?
Probably three.
Three?
I think you've basically got, there's the Russians, the former Yugoslavia, and the Chinese, effectively. They're the three main manufacturers, the only really the manufacturers, and any others that do claim to be another brand are braided tubes from one of those plants.
Right. So that's the first, you know, again, you may have read this on forums, but this is the first thing that I always think is a nice little nugget. When you buy a brand of valve and you're sold it as some sort of high quality variant, in reality, it's almost certainly come from the same factory as all the other valves.
Yeah.
And what you're paying for, or you should be paying for, is an element of testing and grading that goes on.
So with the power tubes, what you're going to be paying for is someone who has huge matrix of EL84s, for example, and they're able to test them and see what the plate currents are, and then pick a duo or a quartet that have the same plate current to minimise the amount of hum you might have on your amp.
Right.
So, of course, over time the plate currents do shift, but in the initial kind of setup and phase, then you're going to have an amp that works with minimal hum, which is always nice.
And the worry is it that a supply level rather than a legislative one, is it that you know, these factories are just very old now, using very old production equipment, and you know, whether it's for health and safety reasons or just the need for that equipment to be updated, you just think that sooner or later it just won't be cost effective to produce valves anymore?
Potentially. I mean, again, this is all complete, you know, just guesswork, really.
Yes.
Conjecture, great word. And for me, I mean, when I've spoken to you know, suppliers before, and they've said, you know, all tubes are handmade. You think, oh, that's ridiculous. No, they are handmade, these tubes, and by highly skilled workers using machinery that's 60 years old, 70 years old. You know, some of it's really, really, really old. And the problem is that tube manufacture was never mechanised, ever. You know, there is a certain amount of mechanisation, of course. There's always going to be, you know, jigs and other bits and bobs, but physically removing the human component was never done. Purely on the basis, by the time mechanisation was coming in, tubes were going away, no one cared. Why was someone going to invest whatever, the equivalent 60s, $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it was going to cost back then to mechanise the whole process when they're going away? Because, hey, transistors are way better than tubes. No one wants tubes anymore. You know. So they're still using this old equipment, and it's a fairly dirty process.
So we talked about, you know, the potential demise of the valve amplifier through just the lack of supply.
Yeah.
But of course, the other big concern is a legislative one. We've already seen with hairdryers and vacuum cleaners. If you're in America, by the way, you can feel free to wet yourself laughing about some of the rules that they come up with in the European Union. But anyway, I guess it's all about the fundamental reasons for doing it are good, aren't they? You know,
it's environmental,
save the planet and all that. But we've already seen hairdryers and vacuum cleaners have their efficiency ratings scrutinised, and the less efficient, high-powered ones have been banned.
They've been banned completely. 100-watt light bulbs is another example, which is not a million miles away from this. You know, you can't buy pretty much any incandescent bulb doesn't exist anymore.
So you were explaining that a valve amplifier is terribly inefficient.
Oh, but they sound so good. But yeah, anyway, that side, yes, terribly inefficient. So a perfect example will be a nameless 100-watt head with 4 EL34 tubes. Each of those tubes is drawing like 2 amps heated current. You've got the HT, everything else going on. However many preamp tubes you've got, that thing's cooking. You've got that thing flat out. To be honest, even if you're not flat out, that thing's still pulling in a lot of current. And it's like 400 watts to produce 100 watts of audio output.
So, and I guess in fairness, if if governments are happy to say that diesel and petrol cars have to be banned in the future, and light bulbs have already gone, and hairdryers, and I guess, let's be fair, they aren't going to blink an eyelid at going, oh, by the way, guitar amplifiers, you've got to change all those as well. So look, that's the picture,
the dystopian future.
Yeah, so it's an interesting picture, and you can absolutely see that if you are a large guitar amp manufacturer with hundreds of employees, it would be remiss of you not to be thinking, maybe we should have something. Maybe we should be investing in technology that gives us a viable alternative to a traditional vacuum tube. Which brings us nicely to, close up please, one of these. I will spin it in my hand. Here it is. You would be forgiven for thinking it just looks like some sort of EEPROM chip that you put on a computer board. But Dave, what is it?
I have one too. This is a new tube, and this is developed by our parent company, Korg, by some people with extraordinarily large brains. Brains way bigger than I think I'll
like a Mekon.
Basically incredible. And about 5 or 6 years ago, Andertons, who is, he invented the Univibe, he invented synthesis, and basically any of Korg's like 80s hit products, him. Clever guy. He thought, I've got a vacuum fluorescent display here, and its component parts aren't a million miles away from a triode. I wonder if we could utilise that. So we called up the company who, are used to selling zillions and zillions and zillions of these vacuum fluorescent displays.
What do you use a vacuum fluorescent display in?
Basically, it's like an LCD style thing, but it's instead of an LCD, it's a fluorescent display, so it's just brighter, and it's just a different application. They're a bit more robust. They tend to last a bit longer.
But you just see them in a display in a piece of
a display in something. I mean, you probably wouldn't see them so much in consumer stuff, more in industrial applications and things like that. But they scale nicely. So this is a very small one, but they do bloody great big things like that, and so they're used to making zillions of these things. And we spoke to them and said, would you be willing to work on a fun little project to save the tube? And they said, yeah, okay. And fast forward 6 years, and blood, sweat, tears. I dread to think how many millions of dollars in man hours and in investment, and we've done it, and that's what this is.
Now, I'm going to be the cynic here, the sceptical cynic one here, because present company possibly not accepted, but many musical instrument manufacturers have elected over the years to put things that light up in their guitar amplifiers to draw us suckers for valves into going, oh, it's got a valve in it. I'm going to probably, I never did this myself, but it was certainly one of those urban myths that if you took an old Marshall valve stake from the 90s, you know, they were one of the first guys to put, you know, tubes in preamps of solid state amplifiers. Yeah. That if you took the tube out, the thing just sounded exactly the same and carried on working. And I was always very skeptical of this idea that you could take a tube and run it in like a pedal or something where the power supply for that pedal was just like a 9-volt 100 milliamp supply.
Yeah.
So there's no way humanly possible you could get enough current to go through that valve to make it react like it would if it was in a regular amplifier. I was always very skeptical that all that was doing was glowing and suckering us into sort of going, oh, it's got tubes in it.
Yep.
So why is this basically just like that?
No.
You know, what is it? You know, is it really at a technical level going to do the same thing that a valve in a mains powered guitar amp can do?
100% yes. 100% yes. And more efficiently, smaller. It doesn't get toasty hot. You know, it doesn't get like warm to the point where you're going to burn skin off your fingers or anything like that. This is basically the first innovation in vacuum valve technology that's happened for, I don't know, 50 years. Let's put the neck out on the line, for probably 50 years. The last development of, like, you know, when they were looking at sort of tubes was the kinkless tetro, which was the KT.
The kinkless tetro.
That's what the KT stands for in KT 88
Is it really?
66, yeah.
Kinkless tetro. That sounds like a YouTube video on another channel that you probably, you know,
Google at your peril.
Subscribe to.
Yeah. But after that point, it was like, well, we've kind of done everything we can do with these things, these spectacularly inefficient things. Transistors are better, therefore go away. And so what we've done with this is we've kind of taken where, because obviously this is a preamp tube, and we need to be very clear about that. This is not a power tube. This is a preamp tube. This does not have the oomph to do any power tube business. This is all about sculpting the tone of the preamp. Sorry, they're pretty hardy as well, so it's good. And so that's
why. So I want to get a bit technical here, and I'm not super technical, but I'm, you know, I hear words like grids and plates and electrons and all those kind of words, and the way a vacuum tube works is quite amazing, isn't it?
It's pretty
sort
cool.
of the way that, you know, God knows who invented that, you know, and quite how they came up with it. But how many components from a traditional preamp tube are physically replicated in here, and if they aren't, how's it sort of, you know, making up for that?
So okay, it has everything a tube has.
Right.
So it has a grid, it has a plate. So audio goes in the grid, audio comes out of the plate, effectively. The key difference between the Nutube and the 12AX7, for example, is how it's heated. Now, the 12AX7 is heated with a completely separate heater. It has an individual cathode, an individual grid, and an individual anode. With a Nutube, it's what's called a directly heated tube. And that means that the cathode and the filament are the same thing. And you control the biasing at the grid with an input voltage. And that was due to the fact that we were taking effectively a VFD, and that's how they work, and we were modifying what existed. Now, the most famous tube that exists that is a direct heated triode is actually the 300B, and for the tube nerds out there like me, it's used in all the hi-fi audio, and you've probably seen them in sort of, you know, sci-fi movies, and they're bloody great big, you know, bottle tubes. And that's a direct heated tube, and they're super simple. Now the 300B, of course, is only a single triode because it's a really great big thing. These are dual triodes. So where it shares with the 12AX7, it's got two tubes in one package, same as a 12AX7. Where this varies is the fact that this can run way lower voltage. It doesn't need anywhere near as much power to run it. It's like 16 milliwatts, 12 milliwatts of power to run this versus the 250 milliwatts of power that would be required by a 12AX7, for example. Yeah, I mean, I could go on, but I mean, if you're, the simple test would be to actually put this in an amp, play something through it, you'd be able to hear the rich harmonics you get from a tube. This is why we still love tubes. The harmonics, the rich harmonic content of the audio. That kind of, I mean, I always say that if you're using a distorted sound into a tube, and then the tube is really, really saturating, you get that almost that growl, and what you're hearing with that, like you strike like a G chord and you hear that growl you can hear, and what you feel is all of those harmonics just going crazy. And with this you get that. And as a hugely destructive way to prove this is actually a proper vacuum tube, you could pop this in, play through it, hit it with a hammer, the vacuum seal would be broken and the tube would no longer function.
Right.
So it's a vacuum tube. Now, we understand there are skeptics on nameless YouTube channels that have talked about Nutube saying it's not a tube.
Right.
It's not a tube. Well, how? It's not a tube. It's just a whatever. It's a blah tube. Who cares? It's a tube. Now it's not round. It's not circular. It doesn't plug into a 12AX7 socket. But this scientifically is a tube.
So again, being devil's advocate, I appreciate that this hasn't been developed into a power tube yet. Why then was the decision to introduce this to a very sceptical guitar world in the MV amplifier, rather than doing, say, an AC15 or an AC13, just saying, oh, by the way, guys, the preamp section for this amplifier is now all Nutube?
It's an excellent question. Brilliant question. And one of the reasons being is we were developing the MV50 in tandem with developing the Nutube.
Right.
And it's always going to be its first Vox platform to kind of, just to introduce it to the world. Because, again, like you're saying, guitarists are sceptical. They are sceptical and they're looking at, well, Nutube, who cares? It's a completely new component. We're not taking a 12AX7 and just putting it in something small and saying, oh, look, it's a tube and a thing. We have developed a tube specifically to work in an application like this. That would be small, that would be lightweight, would be efficient, but still have the same great tube tone that everyone loves. There's not to say that there aren't future plans, because believe you me, we have invested so much money in this thing, you are going to be seeing this a lot.
And is a power version of it far behind?
Yes, very far.
Oh, really? So it's a very different beast.
For now, what we're doing is we are concentrating solely on preamp for now. So that's where we're at with it. So at the moment, because
is that just because this VFD type of technology doesn't lend itself to a power tube as well as it does to a preamp?
Yes, because this is designed to be efficient and low current, whereas with a power tube you'd have to have a lot more oomph to kind of to drive output transformers and all that sort of thing. So like I say, at the moment this is us doing this, test the water, and then basically the process for making these is completely automated. As we were discussing earlier, the process for making traditional vacuum valves is still very hands-on. It's still 50-year-old machines. It's physically hand assembling tubes, and that's why there's so much variation in the tubes, because one person's idea of quality versus another person's idea of quality might be two very different things, and that's why you end up with this kind of the grading process we discussed earlier, because some tubes aren't going to be good, some are going to be brilliant. So because this process is completely automated, we basically take the raw material, it goes in one end of this production line, and out the other side comes the new tube, and we end up with really, really high production yields, a really, really stable production. We don't end up with gains being all over the place, so we don't have to go, this is a high gain 12AX7 and this is a low gain 12AX7. They're all very, very stable. Exactly, very, very stable.
I'm a pretty pragmatic kind of guitar player. I've never really had a bad experience with valve amplifiers. I mean, I've certainly been fortunate that, you know, I've never had one of these situations where literally, you know, in the middle of the gig the amp's just blown up or anything like that. But I know people who have.
Yeah.
So I kind of, you know, I want to like a technology that doesn't use traditional valves. But for me, there is something, and again, I you know, everyone will know who watches this channel regularly that I have a somewhat irrational feeling about Kempers and things like that. You know, I've sort of proved to myself that I can't hear the difference, and yet there's something in my mind going, I still don't, you know, I still want to believe that there is a difference, and it's stopping me from going down that route. And likewise, I guess with Nutube, you know, I want to have an amp that's going to be, I suppose first and foremost, you know, more reliable and more consistent. Although there's a little bit of me, the older I get and having children and everything, wants something that's more environmentally friendly and stuff like that. I tell you what we'll do as a little experiment, and you may have heard some playing throughout this video anyway, because I said we'd chuck some in just to break up the chat. I'm going to get an AB box. Yes, you've probably been watching this video going, what's that? It's a holy grail, isn't it?
It pretty much is. This is our AC15 and it's from 1957, and it's got a Goodman's driver in it, and yeah, pretty much you can't buy these anywhere.
Yes.
So yeah, it's our
So we're going to basically plug an amp in that's about as vintage as it can get from Vox. And then also on top we have got the Vox MV50. We've got the AC version, so obviously it is got one of these in it, little Nutube. It's voiced to be AC styly. It's got a solid state power section in it, so obviously that's going to be a difference. And we are running it into obviously a different speaker, but what I'm going to try and do is get a really great sound out of this, and then I'm going to try and get the closest sound that I can get to out of here, and then I'm just going to A/B switch, but I'm not going to annotate on the screen which is which. It's either going to be blindingly obvious, in which case we can all say to Dave, you've got a long way to go with your Nutube, or it's going to fool some of you, or some of you are going to go, wow, do you know what? The two things do sound a bit different, but maybe not in a better, worse way, just a different way.
Yeah.
And I, you know, it's got to happen, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think we need to sort of drag some of the skeptics kicking and screaming sort of into the 21st century, because, you know, ultimately change is coming. And one of my favourite sayings, and I say this to myself far too much, and it's kind of evolve or die.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. Evolution is coming. You know, and the worst thing anyone could ever say to me is, well, that's how we've always done it. Now, not to say that
my entire guitar collection is based on that phrase.
It's not to say that we're not obviously hugely aware of our rich heritage, and we'll never, for as long as we can, stray away from that. But also, with that one eye on the past, we have the one eye on the future. We want to basically, you know, preserve tube tone, you know, because they could go away.
Do you know what? And the sad thing is, when you actually, I do think that actually as guitar players, and certainly a lot of the smaller, you know, valve amp manufacturers that are out there are probably just thinking, they're just burying their head in the sand, aren't they? Yeah. They're just going, it's not going to happen, it'll be fine. But
same could be said about a lot of car manufacturers.
I was about to say,
the US car, there's a lot of US car manufacturers who've been making combustion engines really well for decades, and now suddenly they're going, oh, hang on, people are starting to buy electric cars. Legislation's coming in where we will not be allowed to sell electric cars.
Yeah, it was like the depreciation on my very expensive diesel car that I bought sort of 3 years ago, and then, you know, they just said, oh, by the way, from like 2020 you won't be able to drive a diesel car into a big city, and you just go, whoa.
Yeah. So
that's not far away.
It's things to prepare.
Anyway,
you know, climate change. Anyway, it's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hug a tree.
Hug a tree.
Buy a Nutube.
That'll help.
That's the phrase. That's the marketing slogan, isn't it? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to hear two amps switch between one and the other. I'm not going to tell you which is which. We might move some of the bits off the top of here, because actually this vibrates around a little bit when we're doing. But I'm just going to play some simple chords on this guitar, and you decide. So, little tone test. I was jumping around between the two amps quite a lot there, and whilst they do sound different, you've got to bear in mind that one of these things is 150 quid, 130 quid with a solid state output and a Nutube preamp, and the other is utterly illegal to make now and unobtainable, jolly expensive all valve. So this is the two of them. So this is the Vox, by the way. I'll put you out your misery now. Sorry, they're both Voxes. This is the AC15 neck pickup. And this is the MV-AC. It's so weird. My brain is predetermined to tell me that I like valve amps better than not valve amplifiers. So the only way that I can do this completely objectively is to not know which is which.
Yeah.
So I'm still hearing kind of additional layers of harmonics in the actual AC15.
Yep.
But it's bloody weird and frightening to think that the other sound, which was still really good, was coming out of something. I've had sandwiches bigger than that.
Yeah,
it's
pretty good. I mean, the fact that that's 50 watts, the fact that you're getting so close to a tube sound. Now, that doesn't have power tubes. It's a Class D power stage.
Sure.
Let's not forget that. Whereas this, this has actually got an EF86 in it, not a 12AX7. So it's actually got a pentode in the preamp, and you're able to get close. But there is, as systems, they obviously vary. So here we're looking at all tube, all hand wired, Alnico driver, which is going to have a huge effect, and not just any Alnico driver. This is a Goodman's Alnico driver from 60 years ago.
No, I get
so
that.
It's super new. Back there, we're using a 212 cab with Creamax.
Yeah.
So there is obviously going to be that difference.
And just Vox have made some speaker cabinets to sort of specifically go with the MV50, but when I say specifically, I mean more from a price point of view.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
so we're running this through a speaker cabinet that probably costs 3 times the price of this anyway, just to give it at least a shot of sounding in this sort of ballpark. And actually, a lot of people will be buying the MV amplifiers to have as backups to their regular tube head anyway. So you might have a really nice cabinet to put it through. I just want to. Can we see what happens if we, there's plenty more gain to go on this. I don't know how much more gain there is to go on
before
that.
it starts going a bit crazy.
I just want to sort of see if, where we replicate a little bit more of that kind of classic Vox growl. So what have we got? Okay, so both amps giving some glorious feedback there. If anything, I think just because I'm sitting closer to the AC15, it's perhaps feeding back a little differently. But I don't know if your guys go, oh, it's so obvious which is which. But this is the I forget which colour's which now. Right, yeah. So this is this one. this is, I'm having a little sort of, you know, there's no loser here really, is there? Because the truth is, one is fulfilling an utter guitar wet dream of going, yay, I've actually got an amp from 1957 and it's amazing and it sounds wonderful. And the other is feeling a little bit of a like, there is hope, because actually the one that's like a fraction of the cost and environmentally friendly to produce and we can guarantee it'll be around for the next 50 years, sounds pretty good.
And this is its first generation. So
for sure.
This is the first product we've got that has Nutube in it, but we've just launched Continental keyboard with Nutube. We've launched the new VX keyboard, new VX bass and VX acoustic, again, all with Nutube on board. Now, the Nutube's used for different purposes for the different products, of course, and again, it's not just in there because, oh look, it makes it glow and it's got a Nutube in it. It doesn't do that. With the acoustic, it's there to give the tube warmth as you'd expect from a tube channel on a mixing disc. With the bass, it's used as a compressor. You know, so there are different applications for the Nutube. So it's in there. It's something we're really proud of. And actually, I'm going to plug this. We are selling this as an OEM part now.
Yeah.
So if there are any other manufacturers, and it actually doesn't have to be manufacturers. This could be hobbyists as well. If there are any hobbyists out there that actually want to try out Nutube, could we put a link in the thing?
For sure. Yeah.
I'll give you a link. And go on that link and, you know, you can buy them and check them out.
I mean, that, I guess, you know, fast forward to 2018, 2019, and people start doing their own little component kit amps. And I mean, unfortunately, until I can take an AC15 with the correct preamp and power amp tubes in it, and then fundamentally a Nutube variant of that, and put the two side by side and go da-da-da-da. This kind of comparison is only ever going to show off what two different amps sound like, without any real, you know, I don't really know what conclusion people will draw from this, other than I thought they both sounded pretty cool. But the really, to get to the kind of if you're a fan of old valve amplifiers, or not old, if you're just a fan of valve amplifiers, until you physically got two identical amps side by side, one run with old tubes and one run with new tubes, and you literally go, wow, I can't tell the difference. I guess that's the acid test, isn't it? So we'll do that video at some point in the future.
Happen. So like I say, I mean, I'm currently developing something with Nutube. You know, Korg are developing things with Nutube. There's lots and lots of new products that become with Nutube, used in all sorts of fantastic, weird and wonderful ways. And like I say, this is the first step, and you've got to start somewhere. And I think the fact that we were able to get something that sounds like that and something that's so small, the fact that it's not a toy, the fact that it's 50 watts, the fact that you can use it on a pedal board.
It's really interesting.
So,
it is really interesting.
We are very, very proud of what we've achieved with Nutube, and you know, like I say, if we're able to preserve like tube tone for the future generations, then we've done our job.
That's deep.
Well,
there you go. Look, cheers to Dave coming in from Vox UK, and that's it. I've been the captain. This is Dave. This is the Vox AC15, and this is the MV50 with the AC kind of flavour. You've been watching Andertons TV, and we shall see you next time. Hey everybody, thanks for watching the Andertons Guitar YouTube channel. If you're a drummer or a keyboard player or interested in music technology, you might find one of our other channels interesting, and I'll put details of those in the description below. If you want to find out more about the products we've just featured, please click here. If you'd like to buy a t-shirt like this, please click here. If you want to watch another video on our guitar channel, click down here. And to subscribe to our guitar channel, click here. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.